Hi, this is Uma. I'm the co-founder of The Star in Me. Very glad to host you, Cathryn, and such an interesting topic. I've always believed that confidence is extremely essential, and it is probably what differentiates a leader from anyone else. So look forward to hearing more from you about this.
Great, thank you. Rajani.
Rajani. Hi, Cathryn. And indeed, it's a great topic. Yeah, I have a startup called Zippies. It's a one-stop shop where you can rent any car of your choice. So being an entrepreneur was my passion, and I've started my journey in 2016. So since then, I've been with the startup for almost 4 to 5 years now. And I know Mahua from PGP Max, and she at the same time, corrects me in multiple, multiple avenues. What comes across, what shouldn't come across, right from class until now. So yeah, looking forward for the session. Thanks, Cathryn.
Great, sure.
One line about Rajni. So Rajni kind of, so the way the networking helps. So Rajni has always lived in the US. She did her master's there. She did work there for 20 couple of decades. Came back to India. She wanted to figure out her own network and she wanted to start her own entrepreneurship. So that's why she joined the exec program here. We did our MBA together. And post that, the venture she talked about, Zippies, it's an aggregator for different kinds of cars, be it electrical vehicle, intercity, intracity, and it's doing really well, and so proud of the ventures. So we have amazing women today, so great.
We really do. We really do. So if you want to turn your video off, you can, so that you can drink your coffee and just hang out. That's fine. And I'll introduce myself. Mawa said a little bit about me, but I started hold on, I'm trying to get rid of my video here. So I started my career as a software engineer. I've been working for about 20 years, and I started as a software engineer, moved into product management. After my MBA, I moved more into marketing consulting. I did a lot of different things, worked on various projects for small companies, large companies. I was an instructor in marketing at Northeastern, but my most recent job was with MIT Sloan. So there I worked with mid-career professionals, and 80% of them were international. So I have this great international global network, and as Moa said, that's where I met her and Saurabh. And I really enjoyed that group. And so I left MIT last year to start my own coaching practice. And a lot of the alums from that program are my clients now. So I really enjoy working with that group of people. And that's how I got into coaching. So today we're talking about confidence. And when Moa and I were first talking about what I would be talking about, we decided we'd do something on confidence. And I thought that might be a little bit straightforward, but as I started reading about it and doing some more research, learning about, confidence is affected by so many different things, by, gender differences play into it, your background, your history, growing up, the things you experience. So I've tried to sort of synthesize a lot of this into strategies and ideas for you to use to increase your own confidence. So if you Google confidence, this is the definition that comes up. And I really like this definition because it talks about trust, belief, and faith. And those are the things you need for yourself. So confidence doesn't come without being able to trust yourself, believe in yourself. So it all starts there. But it can mean different things to different people. When you registered, we asked you what you thought confidence was. And here are some of the definitions you provided. So believing in our capabilities. That's what I just mentioned about trusting and believing in yourself. Executing without a plan B. I think that probably means being able to be resilient and come up with new ideas, being confident that if something doesn't go well, you're going to be able to overcome that anyway and achieve your goals. Knowledge of a subject definitely brings confidence. The more you know, the more you're able to stand up and answer questions and be aware of being able to share what you know. And that positive attitude and boldness, that really is a requirement for every situation that you're in. You really want to feel good and confident. So we're going to be talking about things for all of these. So this is the definition that I'm going to use. Knowing that you can trust your own judgment, instincts, and talent. So really being able to rely on yourself, whether that is by skills or by experience, that you know you can overcome challenges. And the other part is really being sure of who you are and knowing that you're enough. So we're going to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. Here's the good news, is that confidence is not something you're born with. You're not born with a certain amount of confidence. It may seem that some people are naturally confident, for example, an extrovert, but just being loud or speaking up is not always confidence. So it goes deeper than that. And for some, it may come more easily than others. Maybe how you were raised, the family that you were raised in, your culture, childhood experiences you've had on the way. I was just talking to somebody yesterday who, she was the, I don't know her title, she was the assistant dean at MIT, and she just left to move to Wellesley College. And we were talking about this webinar, and she said, I don't know, I've always just had confidence. I always knew I could do it. Hey, well, you're one of the blessed few, because for most of us, it's a much harder thing to do, but it is something that you can strengthen and something that you can practice. So confidence is not something that you're just going to wake up and be confident one day. You have to practice. And that reminds me of a story when I was in my first job out of college. I got to be good friends with my boss, and we would talk about things. He sort of became a mentor. And I said that one of my problems was that I wasn't patient, and I just want patience. And he said, well, you don't just get patience, you get the opportunities to practice patience, which I didn't want at all. I was like, I don't want to have to practice it, I just want to be it. But confidence is the same way. It comes with practice. It's not just something that's going to appear. It's going to take a little work. And there's a book written by Rick Page called Hope is Not a Strategy. So just hoping for confidence is not going to actually bring confidence. So what happens is you practice and you get better. So let's talk about some of the things that are going to help you improve your confidence. So I call this seminar Confidence Inside and Out, because you need both. You need to feel confident and powerful and authentic on the inside, but you also must be able to project it to others on the outside. So let's go inside first. And it starts right here. It starts with believing in yourself. So the most important part of this journey is how you feel about yourself. And confidence can only flourish when you have deep trust in yourself and your abilities and your value. So, and start right now, start right this very minute. Don't wait to feel valuable. A lot of people will think, well, I'll be more confident when I lose 10 pounds, or I'll be more confident when I get this promotion. But don't wait. You're enough as you are right now. Okay, so start with compassion for yourself and look at yourself with kindness, and start to really believe in who you are. That's a whole other topic. So when I was studying confidence, all these other sort of subtopics started coming up, and this is definitely one where you could do 100 webinars on just believing in yourself. But truly, that's where it all starts. It's just saying to yourself that I'm enough, always and in always. So you're in charge of how you feel. I like this quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, because it reminds us that we are in charge of our emotions. We can choose our response to situations. We can change with practice. So accept that you're a work in progress, and that you're just fine just where you are, and be kind to yourself. So I'd like just right now to celebrate who you are right now. Just take a breath and just acknowledge it. You're, especially right now, I mean, you're working hard. You've got your kids, you're doing your startups. You do so many things for your family and the people around you. So it starts right there. Start believing in yourself right now. The other piece of it is to trust yourself. So trust your judgment, your instincts, abilities. You have choices in how you respond. I'm going to digress a little bit into brain chemistry, because I'm kind of a sciencey person and I like it. But every time you have a thought, you create a neural pathway in your brain. It's kind of like a spider web. And the more you have that thought, the more spider webs, threads are created. Pretty soon you could have a whole type of rope there. And your brain is sort of lazy. It likes to go to autopilot. So as soon as something happens to you, you respond with this reaction without even thinking. But it's possible for you to observe when a thought comes in your head to actively choose a different response. The interesting thing is when something happens, it goes through your limbic system first, which is the emotional part of your brain. So no matter what happens, it immediately goes to the emotional part. And then it goes to the prefrontal cortex where the rational and the logical and analysis happens. But you can actually train your brain to stop it there at the limbic system and choose how you want to respond. And that's how you start practicing new habits. So do an example, think of something that you just ruminate on a lot, something that just always bugs you. And it feels like your mind just slides right there. It's like you're there all the time. So that neural pathway is really super strong. Imagine a time when you were really disappointed or unhappy. Now try to imagine that situation and it ended up a different way. You acted a different way, you did something else, and your brain, it almost feels like it's some type of resistance because the brain really wants to go where it's already been. So what you do is practice when you start feeling that way to stop yourself and then go to another feeling. And pretty soon, this neural pathway with a bad thought starts breaking down and you create a stronger one here. It's not easy, but that's a scientific basis. I read a book on that and all the brain chemistry and neuroscience and how it affects how you feel about yourself. And I really liked the fact that it was based on science and that I actually could do something to change it. So the important part of this is to remember that you have the power to change it. So the way you think, if you have thoughts that hold you back, you definitely have the power to change your thoughts and replace them with new positive thoughts. Next one is don't give away your power. So you have charge of your own life. You can make decisions. You can analyze things. You can go out and get a new job or do whatever you want to do. But when you do something that other people want you to do, if someone asks you to do something and you really don't want to do it, you don't have time, you should say no, but you say yes. Or when you do that, you're putting someone else in charge of your decisions, in charge of your life. So you want to be the driver of your own life. Don't give your power away. Don't let people limit you. Don't let them manipulate you or make you do things you don't want to do. You are in charge, so don't give away your power. Keep your power and be thoughtful about how you share it and how you use it. Again, trust. Trusting yourself and your abilities to cope with challenges. And the way you build that self-reliance is to face challenges and overcome them. So you start to build sort of a library of exercises and successes that you can build on. Knowing your subject, I think one of you said that knowing your subject was an important part. So that's true. You're going to feel much more confident when you're giving a presentation or when you're in a meeting, when you feel really sure of your facts. So think about things that you might want to study or things that you want to get better at. Take a class in presentation or study up or read a book on a certain topic. All of these things are going to help you feel more powerful in various situations as you go through work and home and life. So I want to talk about the building blocks of confidence. We've talked about trust and belief in your value. Those are just the foundation, and those things you should be working on anyway, just to make sure you're feeling strong, you're feeling valuable, you're feeling that you can trust yourself. But let's talk about these things in more detail that I think contribute a lot to confidence. So the first one is a growth mindset. So Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset, and she talked about fixed and growth mindsets. So people with fixed mindsets believe that they're born with a certain set of talents and skills. So you're born with a certain set of confidence, for example, and that's as good as you're going to get. And so people with a fixed mindset, success to them becomes proving themselves to other people and to themselves. They can't believe they can increase any of their talents. The only thing they can do is make sure everyone understands like how great they are. So success becomes something a little bit more about proving yourself. But those with growth mindsets believe that what you're born with is just the starting point. So you're just going to start with a certain amount of skill, intelligence, so forth. But through your life, you can grow it by working at it, by practicing, by studying. And they're much more open to failure because failure is just part of the process. So when something goes wrong, they can look at it and learn from it and move on. They don't get really sidelined by failing. It's just part of the process. And if you think about it, you've all been in the growth mindset when you were children. So when you learn to ride a bike, you got on that bike and you fell off and you just hop back on. You got on the bike and you fell off and you hop back on. Same with reading a book or any other sport. Failing was just part of the learning process. And somewhere along the line, we got afraid of failing and we find it embarrassing and we try to avoid it at all costs. So with a growth mindset, you really don't look at failure as a bad thing at all. It's just sort of part of the process. And success for people with growth mindset is not about proving yourself, but it's about stretching yourself and learning and growing and improving all the time. So it's never fixed. It's always moving. You're always growing and always learning, and you're much more open to that. And success really becomes much more attainable and personal for you. It's not about proving yourself. So failure is part of the process. So we said neuroplasticity. Remember, you can change the way you think. So if you feel that you have a fixed mindset, start thinking about looking at success a little bit differently. Start thinking about failure a little bit differently and change your perspective. So you can do that. And failure is part of it. So some people will say that if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. Right? At MIT, students are taught to fail fast. So that means get a prototype together or get an idea together and do it. And if it doesn't work, let's figure out why. Let's try it again. It's just part of it. You're expected to fail. Businesses fail, research fails, and that's going to be just sort of part of the game. So try to develop more of a growth mindset. And again, that book was Carol Dweck, called Mindset, and I thought it was a terrific book. The second one I touched on earlier was empathy and compassion. So make sure you're practicing empathy on yourself and compassion on yourself. So as you're changing, as you're trying to feel stronger, more valuable, you're trying to grow your confidence, make sure that you're being kind to yourself. And if you make mistakes, you just look at it with kindness and understanding. Think about if you had a friend who was trying to change and the kind words you'd say to them about how to pick themselves up and keep going. Use those words on yourself and don't expect to be perfect. This is all going to take a while to do. Any kind of change does. So focus on some positive thoughts, foster relationships with people who can help you feel good about yourself and your journey, maybe give you honest feedback, and build a network around you. And I wrote that self-confidence is a verb, not a noun. It's not a thing. It's just something you do. It's a belief that you have in yourself. It's the practice. And one thing that I did when I asked my daughters, I decided one thing I really wanted to change about myself was to release judgment. So that means releasing judgment on myself in terms of being easier and kinder to myself when I make mistakes, not have that inner voice telling me what an idiot I was. So I have 3 daughters, and I shared my goal with them and asked them to help me when they caught me being judgmental about myself or others, to tell me. And they'll call me out when I say, that was such an idiot, or, I'm fat, or whatever I'm complaining about. Like, Ma, be nice to yourself. So, you could enlist your friends, your family in your goal of self-confidence, saying, when I say things that diminish myself, catch me. So that's just a thought. It's worked for me. So part of that empathy and compassion really becomes about that positive voice in your head. So silence your inner critic. And pretty much everyone has one. Although a few weeks ago, I was coaching an undergrad at Babson College, and I mentioned the inner critic, and she didn't know what I meant. And I said, that little voice in your head that tells you you're an idiot, you're stupid. And she said, no, I don't have that voice. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're like the only person I've ever met that doesn't have that voice. So we all have that voice. And one of the things that you want to do as you work on your confidence and your feelings of self-value is to release some of those old beliefs that don't serve you anymore. Things like, I'm not smart enough, or my opinion doesn't matter. I'm too awkward to be able to do this. It's just not me. And those things aren't true at all. The thing is that our belief system formed over time. It's taken years for you to develop all the beliefs and thoughts and values that you have. And so when you try to look at them and release them, it's going to be hard. So many of the truths that we learned when we were young, we learned them before we were even able to really make sense of them. So when we're very young and we're in our families, and we soak up the values and ideas and thoughts before we were ever able to really sort of decide for ourselves if it made sense. So we just believe that these are true. So for example, if you grew up in a family where the parents expected excellence and perfection, you might become a real perfectionist. You might believe that you have to be perfect to be loved. If you grew up in a family where women's voices weren't valued, or a culture that put restrictions on you, you may not be able to express an opposing point of view in your family or at work in other situations. So, I mean, if you start thinking about the ideas that you have about yourself, and you can really examine them and see if they don't work anymore. For example, I had a client she wanted to improve her presentation skills. And so when we first started talking about it, I asked her, how she felt about presentation and what it was like when she did it. And she said she just hated doing it. She wasn't any good at it. So I said, okay, well, where did this all start? Do you remember when it started? And she said when she was about 23 or 24, she had to give a presentation at a conference or something with a fairly good sized audience. And she just blew it. It was terrible. She felt horrible. And she's hated presenting ever since. So then we talked about what she's done since then. So she's probably in her early 40s. So this was 20 years ago that this happened, and it's still holding her back. She said, well, it was so bad that I went and I took a presentation class, and I practiced my skills, and I went to Toastmasters, and I've given a lot of presentations since then, but I have this upcoming presentation, and I'm all nervous. I'm like, hold the phone, wait. Maybe, it's like, what kind of feedback have you gotten in your presentations lately? She said, pretty good. I said, well, maybe, here's a news flash, maybe you're actually good at presentations, but you're stuck in this old thought that you're terrible at presentations, because when you actually present, you're actually doing really well. So next time you go to give a presentation, she had one in about a week in front of a large group, tell yourself before you go up there, remember, I'm actually good at this, pump yourself up, you're good, and look back at the successes that you had and release that old, I'm no good at presentation skills, and embrace that new thought that I actually am good. So you can use that for a lot of different things. Anything that, in coaching, we call those gremlins. Those are the things that you learned when you were young, and they just become these truths, So remember that what you've held as true your whole life, I'm terrible at presentations, or women shouldn't speak up, or whatever it is that's holding you back. That's just what you come to believe. That's not truth. That's not like universal truth with a capital T, which is the actual truth. It's how you're viewing the world and yourself and the filters that you have. Another thing that I think holds people back when they're trying to see themselves with empathy and compassion is comparing yourselves to others. So for instance, when you do that, you're constantly adjusting how you feel about yourself. So if someone walks in who's who you think is better at something, say, I'm better at data analysis than she is, so I feel good. And then somebody else comes in and like, oh, I'm worse at presenting than she is, so I feel bad. She's better dressed than me, she looks better than me, so I feel bad. Make sure you're not comparing yourself to others. They do them and you do you. So, there's always going to be somebody around you that's better than you, and there's always going to be somebody around that's worse than you. But the thing is that you are still you, and you're still valuable as you. So how you feel about yourself can go up and down in seconds, but don't let anyone have that power over you. So you really need to develop that strong belief in yourself that's unwavering, no matter who you're with and who you're around or what situation you're in. So be building that sense of value, that confidence that you have, the learning skills, so that you always feel good no matter where you are or who you're with. Your value remains constant. Don't let people sway it. And if you start comparing yourself, then remember, replace that negative thought with a positive thought. I mean, it sounds so simple, and it is simple, but not easy, because it's hard to catch yourself sometimes. But just remind yourself that, I am valuable, I'm strong, repeat those things to yourself if it helps. And remember, believe in yourself always, in all ways. So always believe in yourself, and no matter where you are. So don't compare yourself to others. Another building block is create the success stories. So I like this quote by David Story, that self-confidence is the memory of success. That means that you build self-confidence by trusting yourself to overcoming challenges, and then actually facing those challenges and overcoming them. So then you build up this little group of challenges and problems and things you've done well that you can rely on, so that when you're faced with a new challenge, you can go back and think about what you did in those old success stories that can bump up your confidence, make you feel better, and also give you more skills and learnings that you can use and you can apply to your next challenge. So self-confidence is a strong belief in our ability to handle whatever life throws us. And every time we experience that success, it reinforces our faith in our abilities. So how do you start success stories? I'm sure you have many already, hopefully. And something that we've done in our group coaching is to look at their success stories, have them write down maybe 4 or 5 success stories, things that really went well. And then we ask them to look at the values they used in making decisions. And then we also ask them to pull out some of the strengths that they had to display in those situations. And some of them were really quite surprised at the skills and the strengths that they brought out in the decisions that they made when they were actually looking at it and trying to look for what made them successful. So you can try that yourself. You write down your success stories and look to see, like, what was it that made me succeed? And then you can either work in strengthening those or bumping up the ones that were weaker, and learn how you succeed. So not everyone's going to succeed in the same way. So understand what makes you successful, and then make sure you're employing those skills and knowledge going forward. Something you can do is start by setting very small goals. Create success and stretching towards your bigger goals. So you make a plan, commit to achieving it, set reasonable, achievable goals, and then you build those successes as you go along. A good example was one of our clients who graduated from Sloan Fellows and moved back to Malaysia. But before she went, we had some sessions, and she was nervous to go back because she was the only female. She's going to be put on the board of a company, and she was the only female on that board. And she was also a fair amount younger than the rest of them. And she was, I think, in her 30s, but she looked a lot younger, and she was very pretty. So she was afraid they wouldn't really be taking her seriously. So before she went, we talked about some strategies for that. And then once she got there and found that indeed it was sort of hard to stand up and share her opinion in this group, she thought about what kind of goals she could set for herself. And her first goal was really, when I go to a meeting, I'm going to state one opinion that gets sort of heard and validated, just one. And so she would focus on that one thing. And then after a few meetings, she raised it to 2. And she added in other little goals. So sometimes the goals are really tiny to start, depending on how far you have to go, or how much you want to achieve. Sometimes the goal is so small, but that's okay. So you get this one goal, and then you make it another goal, and you stretch, and don't be embarrassed to start that little goal. I'm trying to do mindfulness. I actually have hired a coach to do mindfulness coaching for me, and my coach does it. Meditates about 20 minutes a day, and I set myself like 4 minutes for my first session, and that seems kind of pitiful, but I do my 4 minutes, and then I can do 5, and you build it up. So don't be afraid to set small goals as you're trying to create your own success stories. But a really important thing is to understand what success means to you. So I just mentioned not everyone's going to achieve success the same way, but not everyone is going to define success the same way either. So success breeds confidence, and then you have the confidence to try a new goal, and then you succeed, and it's got this nice little loop. But what I thought was interesting when I was looking at gender differences was that men and women tend to define success at work differently. This is not absolute truth for everyone. It's sort of tendencies and what they've observed in research. So both men and women like to lead teams, have good results. They like to be recognized. But men place a greater value on attaining high positions and earning lots of salaries, and they're more competitive and they want to win and keep score. Women aren't necessarily geared that way. They definitely want they like the title and the salary, but that's not really what drives them. They place a higher value on their actual experience of work. Do they enjoy the day-to-day work that they're doing? Is the mission sort of resonating with them? And many women in high positions will leave because they're just not enjoying their days. It's not worth it. It's great money, but it's not worth it. So they're not really into competing. They're into collaborating and enjoying their work and doing something that means something to them. Actually, the woman I mentioned earlier who left MIT for Wellesley is exactly why she left. But she didn't feel like the mission was resonating with her, and she didn't feel that the people she were working with were sort of her people in terms. She likes kind of warm and fuzzy and certain type of people, and she wasn't able to find that in her group there. But now she's gone to Wellesley. So, women tend to define success differently. So what I wanted you to do right now is just take a moment think about what success means to you, and write it down about what success at home looks like and success at work looks like. So take a moment for that. And I wanted to share a story with you about another client who is defining success for herself. So she's in her mid to late 20s, and she has a great job at JP Morgan in New York City. And she's doing well. She just got a promotion, but we had a call and she said, I'm just so unhappy. I don't think I like finance and this. I don't want to live in New York City anymore. My mom and my aunt both have PhDs, and they're pressing me to go to grad school. And so I'm studying, I need to get an MBA. And she was so unhappy. So she was about to go on a vacation. And I said, while you're gone, I want you to think about a few things. So I want you to write down a list of what brings you joy, and just step back and don't think about your particular job and the career path you're aiming for, but think bigger in terms of, where do I like to work in an urban or rural? Because she grew up in a horse farm, close to me, and she's used to the great outdoors. I live in a tiny little town in Harvard, Massachusetts, and she grew up here, and now she's living in New York City. And she was feeling a little overwhelmed and not very happy. And so we just started talking about, what brings you joy? Do you want to be in a big company or a bad company? Not a small company. Do you want to be mission driven, or do you want to be in a large, corporation that's more revenue driven? What kind of people do you want to work with? What kind of clients do you want to have? So JP Morgan, you're getting high net worth individuals. Do you want to work with them? Or she'd also expressed that she really likes teaching financial literacy to younger people. Is that your thing? So she had all these lists, and then she came back and we started working through them. And the interesting thing was that once she actually sat down and started thinking about it, we totally expanded her idea about, well, maybe you could be a CFO at a small nonprofit that she all of a sudden we're expanding her idea of how she could use her skills in different ways and in different scenarios. And a funny thing was she decided to go for the MBA, which is fine. Other people were telling her that was, that's what she needed, but that was not a good enough reason. But when she actually looked and thought about her future and her career and where she was going, the MBA made a lot of sense to her, and specifically focusing on a couple of different areas. And she signed up for the GMAT class, and then she's told me that I love my class. It's just so fun. So, maybe what people are telling you is success does mean success to you, but you're feeling a little overwhelmed because it's not a decision that you actually made for yourself. And sometimes when you examine that definition of success, you will find that some of it actually is something you want to do because you want to do it, and some of it isn't. You don't want to do that. So define it for yourself, what you think success means. So now that you know what success means, and I'm sure you're going to have to, maybe you have an idea, but you're going to have to go home and think about it. And I would suggest that you sort of step back really and sort of write those things down that I said. What brings me joy? What are the elements that I want to make sure I'm incorporating into my life? What are things I want to leave out? But once you know what success is, you can establish your priorities, decide where you're going to put your energy and where you're not. And then you can start experimenting and take steps towards your goals. Take those small steps. Speak up once in a meeting, and then twice, and then volunteer for projects. And little by little, you're going to build up the confidence that you want. And remember that failure is not the obstacle of success. It is just part of success. So try not to view failures as a bad thing. It's a learning opportunity. And that may sound kind of cliche, but truly that's the best way to take value from when you make mistakes or when you fail and you learn something and you move on to the next thing with greater knowledge and skill. Courage is a really important part of confidence because you're going to have to practice, you're going to have to try, you're going to have to stretch yourself. As I said earlier, you don't get confidence just by wishing for it. It takes practice, it takes courage. So it's going to take courage to try new things. For my client in Malaysia, it did take courage for her to stand up and make sure she was heard in this group. It'll take courage for you to get yourself on stage and give that presentation. Or, if you're in a networking situation, it's going to take courage for you to actually go out there and introduce yourself to people. But you can start small. If you're going to a networking function, set yourself a small goal. I will talk to one person, maybe that's where you're going to start. One person. I'm going to go up and have a conversation with one person or two, or, whatever goal you feel is a bit of a stretch for you. And view yourself with positivity. I can do this. You can do this. But you can't get confidence without courage. You have to risk a little bit. You have to try new behaviors, change. That's what it's all about. But you can do it. I think authenticity has become pretty popular lately. I love Emerson's quote. Obviously, he died years ago, and authenticity was a theme then too. So to be yourself in a world that's constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. So all the things we've said so far sort of comes together in this quote. So don't try to make yourself fit the world. Make the world fit you. Be who you are and be the best you that you can be, and pursue your own definition of success and courage. Know who you are and what you stand for, you define your own rules and values. So becoming your own self and knowing that you're resisting the urge to play by other people's rules, that you're resisting letting people set limits for you. It's very powerful. And be confident in the imperfect, wonderful person that you are. None of us is perfect. A lot of us try, but that just sets ourselves up for failure because no one can be perfect. So it may be scary at first to realize that you're going to have to change to be confident and to live your own authentic life, but it's worth it, and just be brave and have that courage. You can do it. The next one is remembering resilience and persistence. So the things we've been talking about take time, and you're going to have to just keep at it. So just persist. Know that you're on a journey and that you are moving in the right direction. And remember that our tendency is often to blame ourselves when we feel bad, and you might want to give up. I'm never going to be able to do this. That's not true. You will be able to do this. It just takes a little time. Or we blame others sometimes. My parents made me this way. That's just the way I am. You're going to have to take responsibility for how you feel, how you act in the world, and changing your behavior will become uncomfortable. One of the things that you'd probably be aware of is once you start changing your behavior, people will start noticing, and maybe they'll resist. I was recently reading a book about an example of someone who she was always saying yes, and she was resenting it. So she finally worked up the courage to say no to her friend, who got angry and sort of hung up the phone. And 2 days later called back to apologize, and now they worked it out. So be aware that if you're changing, if you're pushing back, if you're trying to stand up for yourself and people are used to you bending and folding and giving in, they're going to have to change, but that's okay. That's on them. That's not on you, but just be aware of that so that when you're changing, if you get some resistance, keep going. That's okay. They have to work it out. You don't have to apologize. Just keep going. and doing your goals. So confidence on the inside. Now we're going to talk about confidence on the outside. And that's ways to project confidence and also habits that hold you back. So first of all, let's talk about the context. So a successful leadership is basically defined by men. As we all know, there are more men in the workplace. There's many more men at the higher levels of leadership. So what they believe good leadership and good confidence is going to be different. So just be aware of that. So men and women operate under different standards. So there was a really interesting article in the Harvard Business Review that looked at men and women in the workplace. There's a lot of theories about why women aren't progressing or aren't as confident. And they put these little bio badges on them so that they could track where they went in a day and who they spoke with. One of the theories was that maybe women didn't get enough face time with leaders as men. And so they did the study to see. And what they found was that men and women act exactly the same. They get the same amount of face time. So they act the same, but what's different is they're perceived differently. So men can be, forceful and assertive, but women doing the same thing can be seen as aggressive and bitchy. You all know that, or women are bossy. So you all know that the same behavior is perceived differently. So you want to be aware of the culture and norms in your workplace when you're on your confidence journey. So keep some of those things in mind. So first of all, communication. So is your voice helping or hurting your confidence? Women often end their sentences with a question, like, I really think that we should move into this supply chain, or I really think, I think, this is what I think we should move into this, and they kind of trail off. Another thing I notice is that a lot of women will negate their statements with a shrug or apologetic look. I believe we should go into this market, don't do that. So just strong voice, calm voice, evenly modulated. Don't indicate lack of confidence or indecision with your voice. Don't undermine yourself with diminishing statements. For example, a lot of women will say things like, I'll just take a moment of your time, or this will only be a minute, or you may have thought of this already, but don't say those things. So that sets you up as somebody who's lacking in confidence and they're not certain of what they're going to say. So be aware of things that you're saying and how you say them. Another thing is to be concise. So part of the research I was doing here is around brain chemistry and sort of some of the gender differences. And women generally have better verbal skills, so they like to use them. They use words to communicate. And we use a lot of words. So we talk with women and we're constantly talking about a lot of things. So we like to share, what we're thinking. And men really, they're not as verbal. So they tend to think about things and move to action more quickly. They move to analysis more quickly. So be concise when you're speaking in any kind of meeting. You want to, present the facts, be concise. That looks a lot more confident. I actually consult with MBA people who are applying for MBA school. And when I coach them on interview skills, one of the things I tell them is be concise, answer the question, don't go off and give too much information. And then when you're done, you stop talking and look at them in the eye. That signals a lot of confidence, because you're not just carrying on and hoping to add things on and say more things because you want them to respond. Say what you mean in a concise way and then stop. The other thing is when you share your opinions and thoughts, be careful about that. I think on my, you don't want to overshare. A lot of women tend to overshare, and I think I have another slide later on that. So make sure you're sharing your opinions and thoughts in a strong and forceful way so that you're heard. Physical presence. So pay attention to the verbal, that's really important, but that's only 40% of the communication. 60% of the way you communicate is all nonverbal. It's body language and what you do. So first of all, is dress professionally. You want to feel that you are, well dressed and appropriate for the situation. And there's an old sort of adage that says, dress for the person you want to be. So dress for the job one step up. You know, maybe that flies in your office, maybe it doesn't. But the thing is, make sure that you are dressed well. It doesn't have to be all fancy and fashionable, but just, you know, be well groomed. It'll show that you care about yourself and you're taking care of yourself and you're looking good. Really focus on your nonverbal communication, your body language. So here's some ideas on what to do. So one of the things it's called fronting. It's just basically aim your torso and your toes towards the person you're speaking with and have good eye contact. That is a very strong pose. You're not like shrumping down, you're standing up, you're facing them squarely. Own your body in the space around you. So another thing is that smiling can be submissive. So you want to smile, but don't smile too much, because sometimes that's seen as submissive. You're looking for feedback. You're looking for someone to like agree with you, and you're trying to make yourself nice. So certainly it's fine to smile, but make sure you're using it. You're not overusing it. You know, it's sort of like that diminishing statement, like, I'm sorry, I don't want to bother you, but you know, so just be aware of that. Own your space. So a lot of women, first of all, you know, stand up straight. Don't be the schlumping thing, which I'm finding myself doing on this webinar, but stand up straight and own your space. So when animals in the wild get frightened, they like their fur goes up and they make themselves big because that's a feeling of power. And that's what you want to do. You want to own your body and the space around you. So when you're speaking, standing up, shoulders back, you got your head up, you're looking somebody right in the eye, and you're speaking with confidence and power. When you enter a meeting, enter it that way and sit at the table, right at the table. So I was seeing that there's, you know, if you have a big table, the power spot is right here in the middle on one of the sides, facing the window. This is the research they've done. It's very particular. So sit at the table on the middle, facing the window. That's the power seat. So take it. You don't have to sit. Don't go sitting in the back, and don't go, you know, sitting small. Don't be small. Women like to make themselves feel really small. So make yourself big. Take a big space. Spread your stuff out. Lean back. You know, like, what are the men doing? They're taking space. You know, what are the women doing? They're sitting here and they're organizing their stuff. So like, take that space. It signals to others that you're confident. And the great thing about the brain chemistry is that it's a feedback loop. So I know some of you may have heard this exercise before, but when you smile, certain muscles and nerves are used when you're smiling. But if you take a pencil and you put it in your mouth like that, the same muscles and nerves are triggered as when you actually smile. So you've got your face in that configuration, and that sends a signal to your brain, oh, we're smiling, we must be happy. So then the brain says, oh, we're happy, let's keep smiling. So it's this kind of weird brain feedback. So, you know, just keep that in mind. And that's the idea behind power poses. So when you're sitting back, that's signaling to your body, oh, I'm relaxed, you know, this is fine, I can do this. And when you're sitting like this, you're reinforcing the opposite. You know, I'm small, I don't really know what I'm talking about. So keep those things in mind. Own your space, spread your stuff around, you know, just be there. When you're standing up, keep your arms loose by your side or place them on your hips. Relax your shoulders and open your chest and put your, you know, straighten your back. Those things may seem kind of simple, but they really do signal to others that you're confident. And it signals, even more importantly, to yourself, excuse me, that you're confident, and you're gonna act more confident too. Expansive postures will show others that you have some power. What are some other things that would demonstrate confidence? I mentioned a little bit earlier, don't overshare. Women often share too much, and when they're asked to present a solution or give an opinion, they want to tell the whole story. So they want to say, this is what happened, this is the decision points I had, this is what I made, this, you know, they go on and on. And remember I said about concise, so you want to be concise just for that reason. But the other is it signals a little bit of lack of confidence in your conclusions. So I was just having lunch with a professor of mine a couple of weeks ago. I got my MBA at Babson, and she was my organizational psychology professor. And she said that back in faculty meetings, another professor actually gave her that feedback. He said, just state your conclusions and that's it. And be prepared to follow up with questions. So have all that information, all that data in your mind, but you don't necessarily need to throw it all out there at first. Just say what you believe, say your findings, and then be prepared to answer questions. But don't overshare every little thing, because that, again, sort of demonstrates some lack of confidence. You feel like you have to justify your decisions. So keep that in mind. The other thing, build awareness about your accomplishments. So women are often loath to tell their bosses or talk about what they do because they don't want to look arrogant and bossy. As an example, my daughter is in med school. She's in her second year. And I've been talking with her and some of her friends about the experience and the feedback they get. So they've been kind of frustrated that some of the feedback they get is they're too quiet, or they're, they need to have better communication skills or whatever. And the men are looked at as, they're looking at how their surgical techniques are and so forth. And she was getting really bummed about the feedback she was getting. So she said, well, I tried something. When I went into she's on hospital rotations now. So when I go in early and I deal with all my patients before the doctors go on their rounds. And so what I started doing when the doctors showed up, I started telling them, okay, for this patient, I did this, this, and this. And for this patient, I did this, this, and this. And then I did this, this, and this. And she said, I did not change one thing except for telling my boss what I did. She says, all of a sudden, they're treating me a little differently. The feedback on my that I'm getting is going up on all levels. So she's more confident, but they also see that she's more competent. So they actually seeing what she did, and she said that's the only thing I changed, was making them aware of all the things I did. So don't be too shy to make sure you're doing that as well. So maybe it's an email to your boss once a week, like just want to let you know this is what I've done. And or a meeting, whatever seems to work for you. But research has shown that is going to really help you, just how they view you as a person who's very competent, who's accomplished, who's reading her goals. The other thing is, like, make people aware of your goals. I've heard a lot of stories about people who were in a situation where a colleague got promoted, and she asked her boss, like, why wasn't I promoted? I've been here longer. He said, well, you never said you wanted to. Like, you'd think that's kind of a no-brainer. Well, of course I want to be promoted, but sometimes you have to be really open about what you're doing and what you want to do and where you want to go. One way you can do that is volunteer for stretch assignments. So you can build your confidence by sharing what you've been doing and what you want to do, and volunteer for things that are going to prepare you for the next level, so that they can also see you succeeding in those areas. Women often have what they call the disease to please, which means it's sort of like smiling too much or making yourself small, trying to appease people and make them happy. And it's kind of natural, especially if you're a mom, because that's sort of what you do a lot. But you want to make sure you're not being overly eager. And also at work, be aware of dismissive behaviors that you're asked to do, like women taking notes at a meeting, or the women are expected to answer the phone, or asking women and employees to get the refreshments or clean the kitchen or whatever that is. Okay, those that's not acceptable. That should be shared. So make sure you're not volunteering for secretarial duties too often. That should be shared. So taking on those diminishing tasks makes you feel diminished, but it also lets others see you as less valuable. So be careful about that. I mean, everyone has to clean the kitchen. We used to take turns in my office, but it's not something that women only should be expected to do. That takes away from your power. So here's some last thoughts. So start working on your self-awareness so you can catch yourself having these unproductive thoughts and replace them with new ones. So any of those, I'm not smart enough, I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough. Start being aware of the things you're saying to yourself, and start stopping and asking people for feedback, and replacing some of those thoughts with better, more positive thoughts. An idea is you can find someone who you think is confident and model their behavior. So wow, that woman or man, I mean, actually in a man's world, modeling a man's leadership behavior could be pretty powerful. Other things that people might do is write affirmations to themselves. A lot of people will write success stories down or things they've accomplished. Also gratitude, starting with gratitude makes you feel a little bit more, I think, powerful and peaceful. And it's a great place to start believing in yourself and trusting yourself. Another thing is building alliances. So in my research, I also learned that women are much better at networking and building relationships. They're just better at it. But men are better at leveraging those networks. So make sure that when you build your network, you also leverage them. And a lot of the reasons women say they don't leverage them is they don't want to look like they're using people, or they want to ask people for favors. But if they're your colleagues, it's fine to ask for help is when you're giving the help. Also, when you move to a new job or you want to start a new project, you want to start building alliances. So you start building those connections in the organization that are going to help you succeed. Again, keep a journal. And remember that when you start acting confident, you're going to feel more confident. Remember that brain feedback loop. And there was that old song from a musical a long time ago about whenever you feel afraid, hold your head erect and whistle a happy tune. So that's all the brain loop. So when you're feeling down, stand up, give yourself some air, and have what they call power poses. And I've talked to other people about this. I share this with my daughter. I've done it myself. It sounds really silly, but for instance, if you're going into a meeting or you're going into an interview, I've gone into a bathroom stall and just assumed a power pose. Like, breathe. I'm feeling strong. I'm feeling big. I'm feeling powerful, and your body starts feeling that way, and you look that way, and then you go in from a really positive point of view. So think about what strategies might work for you. And last, so remember, it's a superpower. You have that superpower. And once you start believing in yourself and working on it, and setting your goals, magic happens. So I've shared a lot of information. Most of these topics could justify 1 million webinars on their own. So I try to sort of pull in the major pieces to give you a scientific background and also a behavioral background. So some advice is just start today, start right now. With small steps towards your goal, share your goals with others, ask for support. You can get coaching, you can take a class, you can read a book, whatever you need to start really believing in yourself. And I think you'll see some big differences. So that's me. Anyone have any questions or thoughts? Or you can put it up in the chat box as well, if I can find my chat.
Thank you, Cathryn, for taking the session, and good that we have 20 minutes for Q&A where all of us can ask questions. I would just start with mine. I don't have a question, but a couple of things that I could relate to, and I know those are my traps that I have to work on. One is when we have conversations, how do you articulate and not overshare? I know I go through this trap whenever I'm talking, how much to share and when to stop. I understand in my mind that, I have to talk this much and just be concise, but I'm unable to do that. And good to know that this is a muscle that we can work on. And it's not that we have to live with and be sad about it. So this is one of my big takeaways, and I will work on this. But yeah, open for questions, guys.
Yeah, let me go.
Champion.
I think.
Hi.
I would make it as a quick question, Mahua. I promise you that.
Rajni, I could actually, I could actually relate a lot of things which we face together,
Yeah. So, Cathryn, amazing. It's sort of most of the things which I've been questioning myself for very long. You're put in a very structured manner, going back to, to relate it, emphasize it, question back, and work towards it. But one thing which was bothering, which I'm not clear yet is, right from childhood, usually, the confidence and success are closely related. They're born together. Either it's with your studies and later getting married, having kids, and thereon. And when it comes to the career, there are few things that you look at, and success is again related to that. And every time you're progressing in your life, from one profession to another profession, being something different, it's always you're looking at, as you always say, the progressive mind, and your success parameter keeps changing every time. So how do you relate your confidence with that? Because when the success itself is changing at every point, how do you collaborate your thoughts towards confidence in that scenario? Because for me, initially when I started my startup, having first customer was trivial, then getting funding was trivial, now crossing a chasm is trivial. So these are different things where I feel I get confidence once I reach that particular goal. So how do you relate success? I mean, because I feel both of them are tightly coupled. How do I decouple them and have myself out over there to gain that confidence?
I think a lot of it is how you define confidence for yourself, in terms of, say, life balance. So when I was talking to my client in New York City, it was, and I've actually talked to candidates applying for MBAs and talked them out of it because it's not what they wanted. So I think being really clear on what makes you happy. So in what you're trying to do, and always being self-aware and resetting your goals. So you accomplish the goals, but I think seeing it as a lifelong journey. So, and you're setting goals. So you got your first client, and it's just working towards that longer goal, but smaller goals on the way. And then once you see you achieve your goal, make sure you're celebrating that goal, because some people will set a goal and then like, yeah, I did that, so now I have to do something else. So take a moment to really celebrate that, maybe learn about that, what else, and then if you're very clear on who you are, what your values are, and where you want to go, when you reach a success, I think it's smart to sort of stop and say, well, okay, what did I learn? What do I want to change? Is my goal still where I want to be? And then keep going. I think a lot of people miss that whole sort of stop, celebrate, and reassess. I think you don't just define what success is once, you define it all along. So I was full-time in a high-tech company. And then when I had my kids, I have 3 daughters, I worked part-time at schools. I'd choose jobs that were more flexible. So they weren't exactly in line with my career, but for my goal of definition of success at that point was that I can be home with my kids, but I can also do interesting, stimulating work. And then once they got older, I went back into work. I started working for a market research company and then moved to MIT. Because my goal at that point was, I don't have to be home anymore, but what I really want to do is get my career back on track. And so I set those goals. And now they're basically out, well, they're all home now because of the virus. But does that make sense to you?
Yes, Cathryn. So it's more of decoupling and, just for that moment, as you rightly said, celebrate every small success that you have and build your confidence and keep moving forward.
Yeah. And confidence is going to continue growing, but you don't, and I think the key is how you view failure as well as celebrating your success. So if you're moving along the way and you're struggling and things aren't going very well, try to see that as a temporary, you really want to need to change your mindset so that you see it as a temporary setback, or it's not a failure, it's an opportunity to learn. So let's figure out what I can learn, then move forward. And your confidence shouldn't really take a dent if you can sort of see yourself as a work in progress. We're growing, we're learning, we're stretching. Remember you said growth mindset, their definition is learning and growing and experiencing. It doesn't have to be a specific goal, but it's sort of a process. So if you can sort of try to get your mind into that new way of thinking and give yourself a break, really, it's actually easier on you to try to have that sort of attitude.
Hi. So. Champ here. Just another addendum to what Rajni was saying. I think if perhaps I can talk a little bit about self-esteem. I think that's more intrinsic, right? And we attach a lot of that also to the success which is on the outside, which kind of kills the confidence as well. So to me, that I think you are enough sort of a feeling that comes from self-esteem. So I can relate to a couple of sessions that I've had with women who have spoken about, self-esteem, low self-esteem issues, and attaching that to a certain failure in some part of their lives and not being able to overcome that. So I think that is also a very important point, which makes us feel whole and makes us feel confident that we are able to, juggle through that part of life.
Yeah, I mean, having confidence doesn't mean you're not going to struggle. It means that when you do struggle, you understand that it's temporary and I have everything I need to get through it. I'm smart enough, I'm experienced enough, and if I fail, I'm going to learn and get better. So that's not exactly the easiest thing to do, but a lot of coaching or reading can really help work through some of those issues. So working with people to overcome their gremlins, like my client with the presentation skills, like uncovering why do you have that thought, and then let's think about that thought. And then you can go even further when we coach clients, we unearth the gremlin, but we also can go further and say, let's reprogram that gremlin. So you have that voice in your head, and there's a whole process around like sort of envisioning it outside of your body so that you can talk to it, and then reprogramming it instead of saying you're not enough to say you can do this. So it's, there's lots of sort of exercises and things you can work on to get rid of some of those things that are impacting your self-esteem, or it's not even self-esteem, it impacts your willingness to take risk. And as we said, you need to take risks and have courage to develop confidence, because that's how you get it, by experiencing it.
Yeah, I know, I so relate to it. I think life, everything is figure outable. That's sort of my line.
Right.
Yeah. My current role, where I'm completely new to the technology and I'm completely new to the sector too. So they're like, two things happening together. So you have to really, show up on a daily basis, and then it's so incremental.
Right.
There are days and there are days. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So one of the things that in the book that I was talking about was building alliances. So some things that hold women back. One is when they go into a new job, they feel like they have to hurry up and learn everything before they can really start reaching out to people. Especially if you're in a leadership position. I don't want to change anything until I really get a good grasp. I'm gonna spend all my time thinking. And in a new job, it's important to build alliances. So you don't have to be perfect. You go out there and say, I'm new to this. Please help me understand this, and build, alliances and people that are going to help you along the way. The other thing that I decided when I moved to MIT a few years ago, I probably was as chicken as anyone. And I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to say yes. So when people say, can you fly to India and give a presentation? They're like, yes. And I've had clients say, can you build a website? Like, yes. And then I have to figure out how to go to build a website. So I just started saying yes when I wasn't really sure how to do it, but I knew that based on, what I've done in the past, that I've always been able to adapt. I've written articles for newspapers, I've done market research, all those things were new to me. And I said, sure, I'll do it. And I did it, and you'll do it too. Based on, your past, you can do this. It's just that fear you have to get over. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Thanks so much. I think it's a nice point. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you for the presentation. And how do you help someone build her own confidence, especially through adolescence, which is very challenging? I am talking about my daughter, because sometimes when you as a mom tell her things and help her through the way, it's not the same as for example, reading a book. I don't know if you can suggest a book for that, or how do you think I could help her?
I have 3 daughters, so that's been my goal as well. A couple things. One is just talking openly with her about it. Another is understanding that, what underlies confidence, and helping her to understand some of those things. The other thing, I have to remember the book, a lot of it depends on how you give feedback and how you can develop that growth mindset. That book might be, interesting for you. But the way you give feedback to your kids can really affect how they view risk. For instance, so they say, don't compliment a child on like, you got an A, that's so good, you're so smart, or like you're so good looking, you're so this, you're so that, because then they start feeling like, you say like, you got an A, that's really great. Sometimes they can start thinking that that's the goal of everything, and then I have to get A's to be loved. I mean, they sort of develop this thing. if you compliment them on the process, on like, you tried really hard, I really appreciate the process. So you're complimenting them and rewarding them for being persistent, for working hard, for trying things, for having that growth mindset, for experiencing things, for taking some risks, for having that mindset. If you compliment them that, then they start to really value the experience of growing and failing and all of those things, instead of just, you know, patting them on the back for their achievements, which can, that is more like a fixed mindset, because they're worrying about projecting their talent to others. So you don't want them to be so worried about the reason I'm getting an A because because people think I'm smart, and that's the way I am. It's the process of working through it. So I would do some reading about the kind of feedback you should give adolescents. Also, it's a really tough age. Something, maybe a group of girls that get together to do something kind of useful and interesting that's not beauty related or sports related, or where they could, you know, win or fail, but you know, explore their feelings together. I don't know. I'm starting to think of putting together leadership alliance groups of peers. So I want to do a group of women in their 20s that are like some of the clients that I'm working with that are sort of trying to find your way and they don't really know where to go. Also women who are in more senior positions that sort of have their own issues. So getting support and just openly talking. I know all my kids sort of went through that lack of self-esteem, but it's helping them to learn to value the process and who they really are.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Prachi,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'm talking. Cloud is talking. Okay, no, I just, incredible. I really like what you have to say. I learn a lot. I learn about my mistakes with my own children. I think those are, my company has been my home. So my workers are my children, or my bosses are my children, whatever, any way you can see it. But it has been great. I learn about myself a lot, and the mistakes that I have done through my life, and also learn from my mistakes. That was really good. I am very thankful for this conference, and I am happy that I joined it.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Prati, did you have something to say?
Prachi,
yeah. Hello. Yeah. So, yeah, actually, I was very overwhelmed with the entire session, and it was really great. So I learned a lot. But I was just thinking on one pointer, like you said that even in leadership, the behavior of a males are very different from, or they may be perceived a very different way than the behaviors of a woman leader. So like now women are there in corporates from a very long time. Why there is no way that we cannot sensitize corporates or something? If particular female boss is behaving in certain way, we might say that, oh, she is very bossy, but we might not say that for the male. So my question is on that part, how can we change this particular perception?
I think it's by just getting more women there. Right now, men define what good leadership is. So sometimes, you're going to have to sort of alter your behavior to if you want to rise up. They've actually done studies that men are better leaders than men, but the way they're reviewed, the way the opportunities they're given, men are given more opportunities and are looked at a little bit differently. So they rise better and faster, although women are better leaders. I think it's just getting more women in there. Sometimes you have to play the game to move up, but being aware of some of the behaviors you can do that project confidence, that building your skills, being active in your own growth, and getting more women there. Having women groups. I was talking to somebody recently who started, she was an engineer and there was only a few engineers in her company. So she started a group where all the women meet once a month for lunch. So getting together, talking about strategies, committing to certain behaviors, or also bringing each other up. For example, if you're trying to work at speaking up in a meeting, enlisting somebody in the meeting to sort of second whatever you say, so like make your voices heard. At MIT, Mawa probably knows this, but they're formed into study groups of 6. And there's always more men than women in the group. So we used to spread the women out, 1 per group. And then we decided after that that we should really, if there was a woman in the group, there should be at least 2 women in the group, so that they have a little bit more power in the group and they can speak up more. So if you can be aware of something like that, so that you're making sure you're supporting each other and helping them be visible and helping them be heard, those kinds of things I think really can help.
Thanks. That really helped.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Cathryn. This is Rocio Flores. And
Hi,
how are you? You mentioned it earlier about the feeling of growing up in a family where you were expected to be excellent or perfect, but so we never learn on how to overcome the failure. Like you mentioned a lot about, okay, learn from your mistakes, just move on, but how to deal with the frustration or the fear of failure? Like, I don't know what have helped you, like what strategy have helped you to deal with this frustration and to really, like have like a to-do list to overcome this failure, to this fear, this frustration?
Well, your fear of your need to be perfect and fear of failure has been there since you were probably 3, 2. So it's not going to go away overnight. So a lot of it is that reprogram I told you about, and coaching can help you with that, to help you understand sort of how it started and how you can deal with it. For example, I was just dealing with a candidate who was applying for an MBA, and we started talking about schools, and she was taking on, she just got a promotion, she just got married, she had so much stuff going on. And so I started, like, I'm going to put my coaching hat on here and sort of talk a little bit more about why you want this MBA. And, because she already had a law degree and a master's in something else. Like, why do you actually want this? Because people at work had been telling her she had to have it. And I said, so, but why do you want this? Like, what kind of life do you want? And, do you want children? So do you want life balance? You want to be like in your career, whatever. So think about like what you're really going for. And one of the reasons she came up with it, she was a real aha moment for her, was when she was growing up, she was an excellent student, but as soon as she started getting really, really good grades, her mother would move her to a more competitive school. So as soon as she reached like doing really, really well, she got moved again and moved again. So the lesson she internalized was that I always had to push myself. I always had to push myself. I always have to be the best. I always have to be the best, which is why she was going for the MBA, because they told me now I have to do that. So some of it, a lot of it really is just sort of thinking back to the feelings you have, how it's played out in your life. For her, that was an aha moment, like, oh my gosh, like that's why I'm always taking on 100 things at a time. And she was running ragged. We'd be on the phone and or on the conference, and she'd be crying because she didn't have time to do her, I'm like, why are you pushing yourself so hard? Let's go back and look at this. So I would suggest you could do it yourself or with a friend or with a coach to sort of really talk about where did that come from and how does that play out in my life right now? And does that make sense for me anymore? So this feeling of perfection, a lot of it is looking at yourself. So how you deal with failure, it really is sort of how you live your life and what you see as success, and then dealing with that failure. So if you change the way you view success, so she actually did not apply for the MBA. I said, let's wait and let's just make sure you really want to do this. So she didn't even apply. So I talked myself out of a consulting fee, but it was more important to have her just really think about why she wanted to do this and whether it was really right for her. So lots of times maybe the failure you're feeling is because you keep trying to succeed all the time, and no one can take on all those goals you're trying to do. So I think it's part of the bigger thing. And then dealing with failure and how to release that that frustration, that again is practice. It's talking to yourself about, you know, a lot of your self-talk, that inner voice has got to be somebody that's more positive, that's saying, like, when you're feeling frustrated, to be able to stop yourself, stop that thought, and think about, you know, is this really worth it? Is this really something that's important to me? What's the worst that can happen? You know, you're going to have to change the way you think about failure. And that just takes practice and talking it through, I think.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take a last question. We're already just on time. So we'll just take the last question, and if anybody has any other question, please.
I have a question. For what I hear in your next, in your previous comment, why do we always have to measure our success thinking about what other people think about that, about us? Because when you mentioned about this, the MBA student that decided not to do the MBA, probably he was trying to please somebody else and not himself. So do we have to learn to know ourselves before we take a decision? And how do we fight with the people that are around us, that are pushing us, that this is the way to success?
It all comes down to understanding what success means to you, and then just being true to yourself. So it's hard because you can say, this is the way I'm going to do it from now on. And people don't like change. It's going to be hard for you to change, but it's going to be hard for them to change. So when you start demanding respect, when you start acting more confident and expecting people to respond to you in a different way, it's going to take a little bit of time. But basically, it's your decision. Am I going to be who I am, and I'm going to be my best self, and I'm going to decide I'm not going to let other people limit me or tell me what I can do? In this case, she decided she did not want to do the MBA. It was not something she wanted for herself. It was something she was being told she had to do. So the same for you. If someone is, and you just have to you can't let people define you, or their definition of success or failure. You have to define it for yourself, and then just stand up, just be who you are and stand up for that. So people around you, it might be uncomfortable for them, but I would also suggest you just be as transparent as you can. So when you're with your friends or you're with your family, say, and I've shared this with my own family, I'm trying to work on judgment or confidence. And so I'm going to speak up, and I'm going to do this, and I'd like to enlist your support. So, I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's something that you have to come to a belief in yourself.
Thank you, Cathryn, for the wonderful session. I think there's a chat question.
It is a thank you. Not just for your own known devils. I mean, honestly, a lot of this isn't brain science, except for the brain science that I talked about. But I mean, it's sort of things that we know. It's kind of like, I want to lose weight, but I want to just lose weight. I don't want to actually be getting on that treadmill, or I want a pill. Confidence is sort of the same thing. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a journey. And if you start today, a month from now, you're going to be better. And then a year from now, you're going to be even better. So just start. We all kind of know some of the ideas that we have to do. We just have to start doing them.
Right. Yeah, thanks. A lot of information, I think, that we have to assimilate, and each one of us have to create our own plan of how do we take it forward. Was really insightful, and thank you. For each one of you who are on the call, thanks for you to take out your time. I know we are all locked down, but this is good, productive use of our time. We'll send you all a feedback form. The request is for you, it'll just take a minute for you to fill it up, but it helps us to ensure that for all our future sessions, be it for the coach or the people who are joining the session, it's being a more value add for them. So just help us, do better each time. And thank you.
Mahua and Cathryn, I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Sure.
Can we sort of make this a recurring theme or a group of some sort, where we kind of have some goals that we define for ourselves probably once in a quarter or something, and then we can get back and see where we are.
Cool.
Yeah, so I've done, just finished one with they're all MIT alums, but a 6-month program where this program, we met every 2 weeks, and everyone had their own goal. But we meet every 2 weeks for an hour and a half, each share our goals, and we'd work on exercises I told you about, defining your values, defining your success stories, lots of different things. So that's definitely something that we could do.
Yeah, Cham, it's a good suggestion. Let us talk to Cathryn and figure out how we can do it given. But I think, Cathryn, the ones that you have been doing, everybody is in different countries, right? The cohort that you have?
They're all virtual. So, but like I said, I'm going to set up different groups. So one might be younger women, one might be women leaders, and they're all international. I mean, my network is everywhere. So it'd be, in this last group I did, it was all virtual. So
Great.
that actually works pretty well, just like, this format.
Traditions, Champ, and it always makes a lot of sense when we do it depending on the the experience level of the group, and if that's homogeneous, it helps us drive it much more meaningful and better. We'll work on that, Champ, and let you know.
Yeah, I think it's almost always good to have a group to support you, to share when you're feeling down, or you're feeling you're not getting it, or you're not making any progress, to have people around you to support you, give you some new ideas. And how to face the situation. So
thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot. And whichever country you are in, please stay safe. It's a tough time. Yeah.
And thanks, Mahua.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Mahua.
organizing it. And thanks, Cathryn.
Thank you, Mawa, for setting this up. I appreciate it. Thank you all for taking the time to spend your morning with me. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.